Well, greetings, reptilians and wicked and evil men that love those lizards and follow them. You hold them up as if they're gods, but I'm going to tell you, I'm bringing out evidence that the 144,000 are about to be revealed. You can't hide us any longer. And what we're going to do is we're going to end up like Isaiah 61 speaks of. Please, everybody, read Isaiah 61. This is talking about the great news of salvation. This is about things that are coming now. And here it speaks, it says, the Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to preach great tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. And it speaks to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Father, to comfort all who mourn. Yes, Angela, you might mourn now, but my friend, you are going to rejoice. It says to counsel those who mourn in Zion, to give the beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness. You're also called pillars, the planting of Yahweh, that he may be glorified. And they shall rebuild the old ruins. They shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations. Now, of course, keep reading that and you'll see that what I'm speaking is true. It's prophecies that haven't been fulfilled yet. In fact, Yahweh had spoke and said that and so did Yeshua, that in Jerusalem it would become desolate. It's not desolate today if you're talking about the Middle East, but there is some information pointing to South Africa, where they believe Mount Zion used to be. But through history, they've changed so many things, it's unbelievable. How the doors of the prison are going to be open. And I say shalom to my brothers and sisters, my human friends out there as well. This is to also help you if you have loved ones or whatever that are in prisons or in this unjust court system that's taking place, where they're acting as if they are the Most High and they're bringing forth these judgments that are just abhorring. They are moral turpitudes that go and take place every day in these courts. But the importance of what I was speaking of in my transcripts, which I'm going to finish here speedily, hopefully. There's only about 13, 14 more pages, where we went through 20 here on the last video. If you haven't watched part 1 and part 2 yet, I highly recommend that you put this on pause and go back and watch those first. And there's something that I keep mentioning, which is also in the very first of the title. The motion itself was a challenge to jurisdiction. And the importance of this, most people are not aware of, because they try not to recognize it in the courts, although it's recognized by federal courts, by Supreme Courts, and supposed to be by all courts. But this is the importance of filing a challenge to jurisdiction, and it can be filed at any time. Here is one court case that ruled, and these are precedences that can be used in any court. It says once jurisdiction is challenged, the court cannot proceed when it clearly appears that it lacks jurisdiction. And they have no jurisdiction to protect known felons in my matter. Says the court has no authority to reach merits, but rather should dismiss the action. And that was Milo versus U.S. 505 52D 1026. I'm not going to read the court cause numbers and such off after this. I'll just read what it says here in the emboldened. And I got this from jurisdictional challenge of any court anywhere. It's one of the things that I found on this matter. I've got numerous things, and you should also take a look at what they call the maxims of law. It's Beaubier's Maxims of Law, and it was written a long time ago, and these are principles they found to be true. No matter what takes place, they are true. and the courts reject those as well, because I filed many maxims of law, and you'll hear of one that I'll be speaking of and slamming the judge and the plaintiffs with in the transcripts I'm going to read here momentarily. It says, court must prove on the record all jurisdiction facts related to the jurisdiction asserted. The law provides that once state and federal jurisdiction has been challenged, it must be proven. Jurisdiction can be challenged at any time. That's whether you've been in prison for 27 years or whether they just filed against you. First thing you should do if they're filing against you unlawfully is you put in a jurisdiction, a challenge to that jurisdiction to use a fraud against you or something they invented against you to try to harm you at a future date. And it says jurisdiction can be challenged at any time, and jurisdiction once challenged cannot be assumed and must be decided. Defense of lack of jurisdiction over the subject matter may be raised at any time, even on appeal. Once challenged, jurisdiction cannot be assumed and must be proved to exist. There is no discretion to ignore that lack of jurisdiction. The burden shifts to the court to prove jurisdiction. And that's why I said in the last video there that a court can't prove its own jurisdiction. That's why you have higher courts. They have to go to a higher court to prove their jurisdiction. A universal principle as old as the laws, the proceedings of a court without jurisdiction are a nullity, and its judgment therein without effect either on person or property. Jurisdiction is a fundamental, and a judgment rendered by a court that does not have jurisdiction is to hear is void ab initio. Ab initio simply means from the very beginning, the onslaught, as soon as they invented these things. And you can go on down and read these other cases, the precedences that were set concerning this jurisdiction. So here we are. Let's get back to what we were speaking of. I hope to finish this here up to show you the frauds that are committed in these courts. The people are allowing it. They do it against the 144,000 as well as others. There's been many times people have been put in jails and prisons and they still don't even know why they're there. It's going on in Texas right now. They had arrested me for no fault at all, but for actually billing a judge for charging him with a negotiable instrument, and they put me in jail, solitary confinement for 44 days and starved me. Well, it wasn't quite 44 days in solitary confinement. The first 2 or 3 days, they put me in a holding cell in my underwear. I just had my boxer shorts on and my socks, a pair of sandals, and they put me in this holding cell that every time someone got arrested and they was being brought in, they would sit there and they'd look at me in my underwear and my socks, walking around for about 3 days. It was too cold to sit anywhere because they had the temperature down to where at times I saw my breath. You know, this is tortures that they do to people. And when I had told them my heart's really acting up and this and that, is when they put me into the solitary confinement where they finished my starving for 44 days. Well, I was in there around the 7th or 8th day. I was in their jail unlawfully using your tax dollars to murder me. Well, they burned down my church and my domicile and my vehicle. And they let me know about it in there, hoping it would just be the camel broke the, the straw that broke the camel's back, but it didn't have that effect on me. I already knew who did it. I told them who burned it down, and the fellow was seen out there, 3:30 or so in the morning on my property setting the fire. People seen him. But would they do anything against him? Absolutely no. It already showed in Enoch where the authorities, would help cover up even my murder. They helped cover up those that did these things. There wasn't even an investigation burning in a hate crime my church in domicile and vehicle. And I ended up having to flee Texas because they was seeking me out to finish the job that they didn't do. Anyway, this is the Reporter's Record, Volume 1 of 1 volume, Trial Court Cause number 23075B. in the Texas State District Court, 104th Judicial District, with the Honorable Lee Hamilton presiding. Whether he was a lizard or not, I don't know, but he certainly is a wicked and evil man that I hope repents. So we got to page 20 on this, but I want to read once again, which in the last video, the judge confirms it because he says this is what the matter is before the court. It's a motion to challenge jurisdiction and objection to partiality shown to known felons. Now we got up here to where I had finally got the address, the cause of action that I was brought to court in the first place, where they used misappropriated public and federal funds because they get mixed. No way to separate them. So these are federal crimes as well as public crimes. And what they did was they brought me into court saying that the matter, the cause of the action was over 600 Virgil. And it was a fairy tale address. It never existed, and it still doesn't exist today. But they tried to put me in prison for 10 years. 10 public servants and the judge and everybody else was trying to put me in prison for 10 years with something they invented, even an address of 600 Virgil, because I billed them. I also billed this judge himself, this man, Lee Hamilton, who is corrupt and acting as a corrupt district judge of Texas, the state of Texas, and he still sat there and judged over the matter, though he was included in a bill that was over $1 billion. So you can see that there's no partiality going on there, eh? But anyway, I got the Attorney General of Texas to make the city of Abilene, 4 years after the suit had been filed, the fraud had been filed, known fraud. And anytime you go into a court of record, they've got a sign right there. If you file a fraud or a forgery or anything, it's a penalty against you, man. But they're just signs for the people. All the criminals above us that are elected and put into these offices, arms dealers and drug dealers and everything else, those who bring down the morality of those who would like to have some morality, to where you've even got to show partiality toward others that you wouldn't have toward yourself. And these people are ruling, but soon they're going to have to open the doors of the prisons, because I'll tell you what, once they do have this investigation that Enoch wrote about, then they're going to have to look into it. And when they find out these judges have acted so wicked and evil toward those that were brought before them, well, they're going to have to open the doors of the prison. And you reptilians hate that, don't you? I don't mind if you kill me over it. It'd be a blessing. I don't have to worry about it, but I don't think that you have that authority. I don't believe our king's going to let you do that. He's allowed you to try on more than one occasion. He's allowed you to bulldoze me and burn me out and throw me in jail several times for things I didn't even do. Didn't even know I could do, you know, but I was arrested and jailed for these things. And then your corrupt system just keeps grinding the people for their fat and their blood to keep your gears lubricated. And guess what? Your machinery is going to seize up here pretty swiftly. There's people that's going to start showing these videos that I've just brought, the series. It's going to be seen. It's already seen across the world. And they see it in the heavens too. Right now it's not so much being heard, but it's being heard by those who are blessed. And then it's being heard by you wicked and evil ones, you reptilians that think that you're going to, overcome the children of the Most High and the brothers and sisters of Yahshua. You have something else coming. So anyway, where I had left off, I says, you got to let them see. So they wrote and said, hey, it's a fairy tale. 600 Virgil's a fairy tale. So then I'm speaking here, and I further saying, they brought me into this court, Your Honor, using fraud, deceptions, false statements. We got 10 affidavits. 10 affidavits. All signed. After they claimed it was 700 Virgil, they understood it, that it was 700 Virgil, but yet all of them 10 affidavits each state emphatically that it was 600. I said the whole time, no, 700. If you're going to judge me, then do it right. Yes, I put in these contracts for you to pay me because you destroyed my life. You took my pregnant wife and threw them out in the middle of the winter, bulldozed our houses with a demolition order that don't even go for the property I owned. There wasn't anything condemned, and you're going to fight me? And you know the sad part, Your Honor? I told you, and I wrote you in several of my pleadings, a maxim of law. It says, evil deeds ought not to remain unpunished, for impunity affords continual excitement to the delinquent. This last December, Your Honor, in 2008, I bought a house. This last January, after I wrote them affidavits saying, hey, I own this thing, don't you come on my property without having a proper search warrant or proper seizure warrant, don't you come on my property. You call me and I'll come down and I'll talk to you. Now this maxim of law, Your Honor, should control this court. I wrote it in many times, because I kept being the one they kept getting the judgments against me. They didn't even have to answer what the true property was, because they were using misappropriated public funds to make personal and private gains, each over $10,000 with exemplary added to it. And you were allowing it because you didn't know. They weren't telling you the truth. They misled this court. They deceived this court. They deceived me. Well, I wasn't actually deceived. I'd like to retract that statement. They didn't deceive me one bit. I saw through it from the very moment that they filed this. They filed this, and you gave me less than 48 hours after getting served this big old complaint to be in your court. And when I brought my answer in before you, Your Honor, you dismissed my answer. I didn't even have time to file it. I was up for 48 hours straight to be here in court to answer something that the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure say I got at least 10 days. But evil deeds ought not to remain unpunished, for impunity affords continual excitement to the delinquent. The court says, Mr. Hawkins, excuse me just a minute, sir. I've reviewed your motion, and I've reviewed the memorandum and judicial notice, and I've heard your argument that you're making. I understand your point. Can you finish up your presentation within a couple of minutes here? And Mr. Hawkins, I say, sure. Yes, sir, I can. They came down in January after I bought it in December, and they bulldozed my home again without notice. 2 homes. Actually 3. I had 2 new homes in 89. I had just bought this other home, and they came down without notice because it excites the delinquency. They had to do this. Why? Because I was an informant. I was explaining to the city felonies that were going on in their land. And like it states, Your Honor, you're in Chapter 32 of the Penal Code, under fraud, it states, false statement to obtain property. Your own law here. These are false statements. 600 Virgil, they claim. I said, no, 700. Now I proved it. And the city even said, okay, well, there is no 600 Virgil. It states, false statement to obtain property. Under B, it says, a person commits an offense if he intentionally or knowingly makes a materially false, misleading written statement to obtain property or credit for himself or another. And then the penalty for that, Your Honor, under 7. A felony of the first degree if the value of the property or the amount of the credit is $200,000 or more. Remember, I had the bill in there for over $1 billion. Furthering, I got messed out of billions because of the fraudulently filed lien or claim that they placed in there, Your Honor. We're not talking one felony of the first degree. We're talking, Your Honor, if you take a look at the styling of this matter, we're talking 10 felonies for just one count. And we're allowing these known felons to be walking among us, public servants, to continue in this stuff. I'm going to have to bring this other suit, you know, where they bulldozed my house without any notice again. And what kind of rigmarole are we going to go through there? They had no warrants. They had no, you know, for search or seizure. The shenanigans has got to stop, Your Honor, and you've got the power. In fact, it's been put in your hands because you're sitting there up on that bench. You are the one that's supposed to look at the law, recognize the law, and by my just stating this one thing under fraud, it's a proven fact that it's fraud when they sign their signature to 10 affidavits. Actually 11 because the city was one. But they all stated 600 Virgil. And you heard this matter. And I was raked over the coals. I lost all kinds of money. I got 7 children. I had to answer these things. I've been damaged. I got friends and family that will tell you that I don't hardly ever sleep anymore because I never know who's going to come in the middle of the night or anything else after the treatment that I received in this court. You've got the power to strike these things. You've got the power to reverse these things, and I'm asking you to do so, Your Honor, and also pay me the damages and to allow to me that which was contracted and put into this file that they tried to fraudulently remove by your never hearing it. The court, thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Does the city have a response? Now, mind you, when the city stood up, they're like, it's a wonder they could read what they're doing because their knees were knocking, their hands were going back and forth. When they were trying to get a thing of water, it looked like a tidal wave in the cup, you know, going on. They heard these things. They knew they was guilty, and they was scared to death. But they also knew they had the judge up there sitting on his bench, ready to cover up for them. So anyway, Mr. Smith, now remember, the cause of action, what's going on, it's a motion to challenge jurisdiction and to show partiality to known felons. That's what they're in here for, and this is what Mr. Smith, the city attorney, is going to bring out to have this dismissed, which has nothing to do, it's the same thing as them saying that I had problems with 600 Virgil, so I bring them in papers showing 700 Virgil I owned, and they kicked it out because it had nothing to do with 600. Well, this fella here is bringing in things that have absolutely nothing to do with the challenge of jurisdiction or the partiality shown toward him, a known felon. So he gets up here and he's going to do the snow job, just for the record, so that the judge can rule in their favor again. And watch how it's done. Mr. Smith says, briefly, Your Honor, there was a final judgment signed by this court and filed with the clerk on November 28, 2006. It's my understanding that there was no appeal taken from that final judgment, Your Honor. I hear Mr. Hawkins stating that he filed some sort of record or some sort of document after that final judgment, Your Honor. And then he's filed this motion to challenge jurisdiction. So he's even saying it here. July of 2009, some 2.5 years later after the final judgment. Quickly, Your Honor, under Rule 329B, under the Rules of Civil Procedure, it talks about the time for filing motions. And specifically, it talks about filing motions to modify, correct, or reform a judgment. And from the motion to challenge jurisdiction he filed on July 10, 2009, it appears to me that he's asking the court to vacate the final judgment that was previously entered and find that the court had no jurisdiction. I'm reading between the lines in this motion, Your Honor. I don't know if that's what he was exactly asking for, but I'm reading between the lines. And today he's making arguments that there was insufficient evidence for the final judgment to be rendered in the first place, Your Honor. Well, I guess could be considered a motion for new trial. I guess it could be considered that. But under Rule 329B, it talks about a motion for new trial. If filed, shall be filed prior to or within 30 days after the judgment or other order complained of is signed. And 329B, G, talks about a motion to modify, correct, or reform a judgment also has to be filed within 30 days. And Part D talks about a trial court has plenary power to grant a new trial or vacate, modify, or correct a judgment within 30 days after the judgment is signed. Your Honor, obviously, the 30 days has passed. Even if the document that had been filed within the 30-day period was considered a request for new trial, there was no order granting a new trial. And that rule talks about if there's no order signed within 75 days, then it's considered overruled by operation of law. And then the appellate period begins to run, Your Honor. And it's my understanding that there was no appeal taken in this case to the Court of Appeals. It appears to me that the respondent is arguing an appellate issue before this court today, that there was insufficient evidence for the final judgment to be rendered, which, you know, the court has no plenary power to vacate its prior judgment. It has no plenary power to issue a new trial. It has no power to hear an appeal, Your Honor. And I also think he argued about an open records request. You know, that's not within the jurisdiction of this court as well, but that was in 2007, Your Honor. You know, that's the first I've heard of that. So I don't believe that the court has any power. Even if the court wanted to vacate the judgment, even if the court wanted to grant a new trial, even if the court wanted to grant what the respondent is asking for, I don't believe that the rules of civil procedure and state law allows this court to do anything at this point, Your Honor. Under this motion that he's filed and the argument that he's made, so I believe that the court's hands are basically tied under the law, Your Honor. And the second argument I would make is under Rule 329B. It talks about if the time period has lapsed for a motion for new trial or a motion to vacate the judgment or reform the judgment, that the respondent can file a bill of review. And I don't believe that even in the motions that are filed and even the argument today, I don't believe he's argued anything that would show this court that he has a meritorious allegation bill of review. And I have a Supreme Court case that sets out the requirements for bill review if I could present to the court, Your Honor. And the court says, please. So he's gonna show it, but I put in a challenge to jurisdiction. I didn't follow any of these other things because none of them matter. They're just rabbit holes. I know exactly how to get to the heart of the beast. So then Mr. Smith, after he hands it to the judge, handing it to the judge, and to me, Mr. Hawkins, then the court says, what does this case stand for? And Mr. Smith says, Your Honor, this is a case, Baker versus Goldsmith, which is a 1979 case. And it basically sets out what a complaint has to show to have a bill of review granted in a trial court after the plenary power has passed. So then Mr. Hawkins, here me, I say, Your Honor, I have to object. I didn't put in no bill of review. I don't know why you would even be bringing this up when there's no bill of review that I filed. And the court says, response, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith says, well, Your Honor, for what he filed, I really couldn't tell what he was filing, so I just wanted to address all these issues with the court. And the court says, okay, you may continue, Mr. Smith. So Mr. Smith says, thank you, Your Honor. It says, in order to be successful upon a bill of review, the complaint must allege and prove meritorious defense to the cause of action alleged to support the judgment. Now remember, they didn't even have to answer what the cause of action was. They waited 4 years, had to be out of court before they finally let me know in writing that there was no 600 Virgil, which they brought me into court for. And now he's trying to say here, it says, in order to be successful upon a bill of review, the complaint must allege and prove materious defense to the claim of action alleged to support the judgment, which I don't believe he's alleged or proven that he had a meritorious defense. So I say, I never even put in for one. Mr. Smith says, secondly, Your Honor, he has to allege and prove that he was prevented from making that defense by fraud or accident or wrongful act of the opposing party. And I believe all the arguments that he's made today is all evidence that he was aware, and that occurred prior to the final judgment being entered, which is true. That's why I filed the challenge of jurisdictions. He further saying, so I don't believe that there was any fraud or accident that he can rely upon that would show that he was prevented from presenting any defense, Your Honor. Oh, and thirdly, it says that it has to be unmixed with any fault or negligence of his own, Your Honor. And I believe if Mr. Hawkins was aware of all these alleged frauds that he's claiming today, and he was aware of the right to seek an order about jurisdiction, he was aware of all these things prior to the final judgment being entered. And I believe he even testified today he made the decision to put everything on hold and seek a remedy through the Attorney General. I merely said, no. Mr. Smith says, Your Honor. And I say, I object, Your Honor. That's not what I stated at all. Court, response? Mr. Smith, I believe that's what he stated, Your Honor. He made the decision to, and then the court says, the court recalls what's been stated. Please continue, Mr. Smith. You know, it's an act like Mr. Smith's getting reprimanded or something there. So Mr. Smith says, thank you, Your Honor. Under all these things, I don't believe that he's met any of these 3 steps for a bill of review, Your Honor, and that the court has no power to grant a bill of review and has no power to vacate or reform the final judgment that was entered 2.5 years ago, Your Honor. So I say, well, I agree with all that, Your Honor, because I didn't put in for a review, a bill. What we're talking apples and oranges here. That has absolutely nothing to do with anything. That's the pleadings before the court today or at any time. I've never done that. So why would he bring this up in court to further deceive and cloud the issues? The judge says, thank you, Mr. Hawkins. And I say, you're welcome, sir. And then the court says, okay, I signed the final judgment and order in this case November 28, 2006. I no longer have plenary power over this case. Of course, I say, I object, Your Honor. You do have because, and the court says, and I quite quickly interrupt again and say, I objected to the jurisdiction of this court. And the court says, and then I further say, and that froze all plenary powers. The court says, as I said, I have no plenary power in this matter. And Mr. Smith, if you will prepare a finding and order for my signature and send it to me. He's asking the felons to fill out something else as the judgment in this matter to file in court against me because they're all felons. And Mr. Smith, if you will prepare a finding in order for my signature and send it to me, I would like for you to simultaneously send a copy of your proposed order to Mr. Hawkins. And I will hold your proposed order for 7 days. If there is no objection as to form, I will sign the order. And we are in recess today. Thank you very much. Got up and ran out the court. Proceedings were adjourned. The same thing, you know, when they had signed the proposed judgment order there before, And I looked at it, said, it's fine, I'll go along with your proposed judgment order there. And then they completely, fraudulently, with aggravated perjury and forgery, reconstrued everything that they had showed me to where they protected themselves against things the judge couldn't do because he was already on the line. These are horror stories. And then, of course, you got this fella here, this Julia Campbell, that she's the one that wrote up this transcript, and then she certifies everything in here is right and true that they actually put in there, But, my friends, all you lizards out there, my brothers and sisters, we need to start praying for each other. We need to start opening our eyes and seeing what's taking place. Our king is on his way, believe you me. They've noticed, it looks like what is it, not Star Wars, it was, I had Captain Kirk in there and everything, but one of the later shows, it shows the Borgs, and they come in this cube. We're coming to assimilate you all. Well, when Yahshua comes, they're trying to depict that on the evil side, because Yahshua comes, and everyone's going to believe. In fact, Satan's going to be put in prison for 100 years after our king returns, okay, for 1,000 years. And then at the end of that 1,000 years, when there's a second resurrection, Satan will be released to bring these things all about again. And you're going to come up with a great army against Jerusalem at that time, and Yahweh's going to, puff out a little bit out of his nostril and burn them all to ashes, to be ashes under the soles of the righteous. My friends, please, pass this around. Let them see what the courts today are doing, what they've been doing. As you see, this was going on from 2003. These things should not be. These men should be in prison. Our prisons are full of those that don't deserve or have any reason to be there. Now, there are some that do. Well, they shouldn't either, because if you murdered somebody, you should be stoned to death, and it should put the end to these murders. Now, if you raped someone, you should have your ass stoned, man. Burned at a stake or whatever. Pour some hot lead down your throat. Throw you off the cliff, to the crocodile. Something should be done instead of housing them in prisons. But there are so many innocent people there. And the doors are about to be opened on those prisons when they do this investigation that Enoch spoke of. And he's going to have the prisoners released, because it's going to be known that they're there for no jurisdictional purpose other than making money. That's why they have the prison systems today. They're all independently owned. They have nothing to do with the justice system. They're making money. You could make more money. If you just took one prisoner into the basement of your house, man, you could live and have a new car and everything and maybe teach that prisoner something. But no, they put him into these compounds where most of your senators and congressmen and presidents and everyone else has stock in these here privately owned prisons that they have the power to fill up and to keep there, so that your tax dollars will pay for them, so that your politicians and the arms dealers and the drug dealers out there can make abundant amount of money off all these poor sheep. Start praying, my friends. Let's pray for judgment to come. It's already coming, but we need it to come better. Isaiah speaks about us. Yahshua spoke about us. Enoch spoke about us. A number no man can count is going to come out because of what we're putting out here and revealing. And soon the 144,000 will be revealed. All of creation is crying and moaning and groaning for them to be revealed. Well, I'm revealing now that what Enoch had said about me over here, and Enoch 103, 104, well, basically the entire book of Enoch speaks of the righteous ones in these last days. That's what Enoch was written for, was these last days. And that's why for many years the book of Enoch had been almost forgotten. Now it's brought back because there's more clarity to these things. And like it says, cry for judgment, and it shall appear for you. For all my tribulations, your tribulations shall be demanded for investigation from the responsible authorities, from everyone who assisted those who plundered you. Be hopeful and do not abandon your hope, because there shall be a fire for you. You are about to be making a great rejoicing like the Malachim of heaven. And isn't that beautiful? Time's coming. People are starting to hear my words. They're not my words. Our King is speaking through me. He has been conditioning me for so many years through these courts, through these robbers and pirates, by these reptilians, and by the wicked and evil men who worship them and hang out in their little den of vipers and their broods of vipers and snakes. Having their enjoyment now. Y'all rejoicing now, or you're going to mourn. Our King is going to whoop your asses. I'd repent if I was you, and I'd do it bitterly, and I'd do it swiftly. Because I'm telling you what, when it comes time to pay, when you get your wages of sin that you've been earning all this time, yeah, they're wages. You had to work for it. You have to work for salvation as well. We all have to work out our own salvation. And without works, you have no faith, my friends. So with that, I love y'all that are human beings, my brothers and sisters and friends, and even enemies that are human beings. And I say, see y'all later, you reptilians, you lizards, and you who worship them. Shalom, my friends.